Really interesting article called The Cure for Your Allergy, a Hookworm. A team of British scientists investigating whether a tiny tropical hookworm could provide a cure for asthma and hay fever have committed the ultimate act of bravery by infecting themselves with the parasite to observe the effects. The experts wanted to see if there would be any unpleasant or dangerous side effects from the worm, so they made the bold decision to allow their own bodies to be infected. Each scientist had to stick some of the tiny hookworm larvae onto their skin with a plaster and wait for the larvae to wriggle through the skin into the lungs, through the bloodstream, and into the intestine where they would produce eggs. The eggs are excreted, but once the adult hookworms are in the gut, they start to suck blood from the walls of the intestine. The theory is that this infection triggers an immune response which helps to dampen down the overreaction of the rest of the system, which is why patients with allergies such as asthma develop symptoms. Professor David Pritchard and his team at Nottingham University's School of Pharmacy administered different amounts of the hookworms to themselves to prove that it would be safe. Pritchard himself stuck 50 of the larvae onto his skin. It was fairly itchy when they first go through the skin, he admitted. After that, you don't really notice them. The trials proved that a low dosage of 10 worms in the infection was safe. Last week, the first patients arrived at the School of Pharmacy to have the hookworm larva administered to see if it would quell hay fever symptoms. Pritchard said the pollen season is coming in spring, and we hope that we might see an alleviation of symptoms in some of the patients who received the worms. If we think there's some indication of success, we will move on to the asthma patients. In the 70s, doctors first noticed that people infected with hookworms did not seem to suffer from allergies such as asthma, and scientists have reported that Crohn's disease also does not appear in countries where the infection is rife. Pritchard wants to see if the hookworms are influencing regulatory T cells, which seem to keep the immune system response in check. If we can work out how these cells are switched on, then the pharmaceutical industry could become involved. Very interesting. So this is another article indicating that worms and parasites and bacteria are meant to work in our bodies symbiotically. And theories on bacteria and worms and parasites are in the very early stages of development right now. We still are trying to understand what is going on with this whole thing. But I'm under the assumption, through a lot of the teachings of Ajahn van der Planets, that animals are born with the larvae of bacteria and parasites already in our cells, and throughout our life they become activated through certain processes, whether they're needed for detoxification and moving dead cells out of the body or other things. And this explains why when you eat meat, you would get the larva of a worm in there from the animal, because they are also born with all of the larvae that we are born with inside of their flesh as well. So I think we're all born with this stuff inside of us, and the key is just having a healthy balance, and toxins and eating bad food makes an imbalance, and it seems like the people that are having autoimmune symptoms are having things happen where the worms are becoming eradicated somehow. So the key is to have them in there. Let's see what Helminthic Therapy in Wikipedia says here. Helminthic therapy is an experimental type of immunotherapy, the treatment of autoimmune diseases and immune disorders by means of deliberate infestation with the helminth or with the eggs of a helminth. Helminths are parasitic worms such as hookworms, whipworms, and threadworms that have evolved to live within a host organism on which they rely for nutrients. There's two kinds, nematodes and trematodes, and they're investigating a few different kinds here. Current research targets Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, multiple sclerosis, and asthma. These three I have suffered from. Well, multiple sclerosis, I've had some symptoms of that. Celiac, I've had every symptom of that. Asthma, I was having that as well. Pretty sure I've had some of these bowel diseases going on at the same time too, just not as bad as some of my other stuff. So, I'm seeing results from eating raw meat for 9 months, which are probably infected with worms, worm larvae. Where else would it come from, if it doesn't come from meat? And, I'm eating this stuff all the time and I feel great. So it could be dampening some kind of autoimmune response that I had going on. Incidence of autoimmune diseases and parasitic infestation. This is an article, or a little section about autoimmune disease. While it is recognized that there is probably a genetic disposition in certain individuals for the development of autoimmune diseases, This, I think, is true. This explains why you have a large portion of the population just being crushed by autoimmune disease, and then you have other people that think they're crazy because they have no idea what they're talking about. The rate of increase in incidence of autoimmune diseases is not a result of genetic changes in humans. The increased rate of autoimmune-related diseases in the industrialized world is occurring in too short a time to be explained in this way. There's evidence that one of the primary reasons for the increase in autoimmune diseases in industrialized nations is the significant change in environmental factors over the last century. Environmental factors include exposure to certain artificial chemicals from industrial processes, medicines, farming, and food preparation. It is posited that the absence of exposure to certain parasites, bacteria, and viruses is playing a significant role in the development of autoimmune diseases in the more sanitized and industrialized Western nations. Lack of exposure to naturally occurring pathogens and parasites may result in an increased incidence of autoimmune diseases. Correlational data has shown the prevalence of helminthic infestations to be the greatest south of the equator, where the rates of autoimmune diseases such as multiple sclerosis are low. There's also a lot more sun around there, right? This is consistent with the hygiene hypothesis, which suggests that helminthic infections protect individuals from developing autoimmune diseases rather than being an agent responsible for inducing them. A complete explanation of how environmental factors play in autoimmune diseases has still not been proposed. Epidemiological studies, such as the meta-analysis by Leonardo B. et al., however, have helped to establish the link between parasitic infestations and the protective role in autoimmune disease development. They get more into some details here, and yeah, they're looking into treating people with worms for celiacs, Crohn's, multiple sclerosis, ulcerative colitis, atherosclerosis. These are all kind of linked diseases here. So yeah, this is very interesting stuff. This is just, one type of life form here that they're discovering has some sort of role in our body for regulating health and immune system, and this is all very interesting. So there you go. Thanks for checking in, guys. We'll see you next time.